Admiral Kyung felt his hands shake as the alarm screamed through the command center. 20 years of military service had prepared him for many things, but not this. The massive holographic display showed something that shouldn't exist floating. In the most dangerous part of known space, the dark nebula stretched across the screen like a purple wound in the stars. For 300 years, every government in the galaxy had agreed on one thing: nobody goes there. Ships that entered never came back. Even automated probes stopped transmitting the moment they crossed the boundary. It was a place where the laws of physics seemed to bend and break. But now something was in there, something big. Lieutenant Sojin ran over from the scanning station, her face pale. "Sir, the readings don't make sense. The ship is generating power, but not in any way we understand. The hull material is registering as both metal and something else entirely. Our computers keep crashing when they try to analyze it." Kyung zoomed in on the mysterious vessel. It looked like it had been through hell. Massive tears ran along its sides, but they were sealed with what looked like hardened foam that sparkled with its own light. The ship was enormous, easily 3 times larger than their biggest battleships. Strange weapon ports dotted its surface, but their design was completely alien to anything in the galactic databases. "How did it get there?" Kyung asked, though he already knew nobody had an answer. The dark nebula wasn't just empty space that ships avoided. It was a graveyard that actively hunted. Sensor readings from the edge showed gravitational waves that moved in impossible patterns, energy storms that appeared from nothing, and areas where time itself seemed to slow down or speed up randomly. The greatest minds in the galaxy had studied it for centuries and concluded it was some kind of natural phenomenon that couldn't be explained. Captain Minji burst through the command center doors, still putting on her uniform jacket. "Admiral, we're getting reports from border stations all along the nebula. They're all detecting the same thing. How is this possible?" Before Kyung could answer, the communication panel lit up with incoming messages from across 3 star systems. The emergency beacon was activated, which meant the Galactic Council was being called into session. That hadn't happened in over 50 years, not since the Centauri War almost tore apart their alliance. "Sir," called out Operator Jinwoo from his station. "I'm picking up something else. The ship, it's not completely dead. There are faint life signs inside. Whatever crew it has, some of them are still alive." The command center fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the computers. Kyung stared at the display, trying to process what this meant. A ship full of living beings had somehow survived in a place that killed everything that entered it. Either they had found a way to beat the nebula's deadly effects, or they had been in there so long they had adapted to survive. "Run a full spectrum analysis," Kyung ordered. "I want to know everything about that ship. What it's made of, how it's powered, and how long it's been floating in there. And get me a direct line to Council headquarters. They need to know about this immediately." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Scientists from across the fleet ran every test they could think of, but the results only raised more questions. The ship's hull was composed of materials that their periodic tables said couldn't exist. The energy it was giving off followed patterns that violated basics principles of physics. Most disturbing of all, deep scans showed that parts of the ship were actually repairing themselves, as if the vessel had some kind of advanced healing system. As reports flooded in from other monitoring stations, it became clear that the ship's appearance wasn't an isolated event. Energy readings throughout the dark nebula were shifting in ways they had never seen before. Whatever this vessel was, its presence was changing the nebula itself. The emergency council session began with representatives from 12 different species arguing over holographic displays. Some wanted to send a rescue mission immediately. Others insisted they should destroy the ship before whatever was inside it could escape the nebula. A few suggested they should simply pretend they had never detected it and hope it disappeared as mysteriously as it had appeared. But Admiral Kyung knew they were past the point of pretending. The ship was there. It was real, and it represented either humanity's greatest discovery or its greatest threat. As he watched the politicians argue, he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was sleeping inside that battered vessel would soon wake up and change everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. Commander Hana gripped the armrest of her command chair as her fleet slowly approached the mysterious ship. She had made first contact with 17 different alien species during her career, but this felt different. Something about the vessel ahead made her stomach twist with anxiety. Maintaining. Safe distance of 50,000 kilometers, reported her navigation officer. The fleet consisted of 12 ships from 6 different worlds, each one representing the best xeno-contact specialists their species had to offer. If anyone could handle this situation safely, it was her team. But as they drew closer, the readings became more impossible to believe. "Commander," called out Dr. Sunho from the science station, his voice shaking slightly. "The structural analysis is complete, and I don't understand how this ship is still in one piece. Look at this section here." He pointed to a massive gash along the vessel's side. The metal should have bent inward from gravitational stress, but it's somehow holding its original shape. The material is behaving like it remembers what it's supposed to look like. Engineer Yejin leaned over the display, studying the readings. It's not just the hull. The entire ship is constructed using principles we don't recognize. See these support beams? They're carrying weight that should crush them, but they're not even bending. It's like the ship exists in its own pocket of physics where normal rules don't apply. Hana authorized the boarding operation after 3 hours of detailed scans revealed no immediate threats. The airlock cycled open with a hiss that echoed strangely, as if the air inside the ship was somehow different from what they were used to breathing. The interior corridors were dimly lit by emergency lighting that cast strange shadows on the walls. Everything looked functional but worn, like equipment that had been pushed far beyond its intended limits. Patches of that same sparkling foam they had seen on the exterior sealed cracks in the walls and ceiling. "Life support is active but minimal," reported Security Chief Do-hyun through his helmet comm. "Atmosphere is breathable for most of our species, but it feels recycled, like it's been processed and reprocessed hundreds of times." They found the crew quarters first. Row after row of cylindrical pods lined the walls, each one containing a sleeping figure. The pods themselves were a fascinating mixture of technologies. Some components looked advanced beyond anything in the galactic database, while others appeared to be cobbled together from spare parts and emergency repairs. "These aren't standard cryogenic systems," whispered Dr. Sunho as he ran his scanner over the nearest pod. "They're using at least 6 different technological approaches just to keep these people alive. It's like someone took parts from completely different civilizations and somehow made them work together." Commander Hana approached the pod that seemed to contain the highest-ranking officer, based on the symbols on his uniform. The face inside looked remarkably similar to several known species, but with subtle differences that marked him as something entirely new. "Begin revival procedures," she ordered. The awakening process took nearly an hour. The figure inside stirred slowly, his eyes opening with obvious confusion and pain. When he finally sat up, he looked around at the assembled alien faces with surprising calm. "I am Captain Minho of the United Earthship Resilient," he said in a language that the universal translators struggled to process. "If you can understand me, then I assume you represent the local galactic government." The words sent a shock through the boarding party. Earth was a legend, a dead world that existed only in the oldest historical records. According to every database, in the galaxy, the planet had been destroyed centuries ago along with its entire species. "Your species is supposed to be extinct," Commander Hana said carefully. Captain Minho's expression grew dark. "We very nearly are. What you see here represents about 200 of humanity's survivors. We've been running for longer than I care to calculate, jumping through experimental rifts in space to stay ahead of something that consumed our entire civilization." He gestured to the pods around them. "These are engineers, scientists, soldiers, and civilians, some of the brightest minds humanity ever produced, all sleeping because we don't have enough resources to keep everyone awake at once. We've been taking shifts, a few dozen at a time, maintaining the ship and searching for somewhere safe to hide." As Captain Minho spoke, his crew began to wake up one by one. They moved with practiced efficiency, despite their long sleep, checking systems and reading displays with the urgency of people who had learned to expect disaster at any moment. "What destroyed your world?" asked Dr. Sunho. "We called it the hunger," Minho replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Imagine something that eats entire star systems, converting matter and energy into more of itself. It found Earth when we were at the height of our civilization. We fought it for 10 years before we realized we couldn't win. He stood up slowly, still weak from the revival process. Our final desperate plan was to tear holes in space itself, using experimental technology. We've been jumping from place to place ever since, hoping to find somewhere it can't follow us. Commander Hannah felt a chill run down her spine. And now, you're here in our galaxy. Captain Minho nodded grimly. I'm afraid so, and if past experience is any guide, the hunger will eventually follow our trail. It always does. The warning that changed everything. When Captain Minho stepped forward to address the Galactic Council, the massive chamber fell silent. Representatives from dozens of different worlds leaned forward in their seats, sensing that what they were about to hear would change their lives forever. The captain's weathered face told a story of horrors witnessed and barely survived. He began his testimony with words that would haunt the council members for years to come. What we faced wasn't just another alien species or natural disaster, Minho said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. This thing doesn't just destroy planets or solar systems. It devours entire civilizations, absorbing everything they ever were or could have been. The captain explained how this cosmic predator operated with a terrifying efficiency. It didn't simply obliterate worlds like some massive weapon. Instead, it consumed them completely, transforming matter, energy, and even the essence of life itself into fuel for its endless hunger. Every person, every building, every memory became part of this growing nightmare that stretched across the stars. Imagine watching your entire world being digested alive, Minho continued, his voice growing quieter as painful memories surfaced. First, the atmosphere begins to shimmer and twist. Then the oceans start to boil, not from heat, but from something far worse. The very molecules of water transform into something alien and wrong. People don't just die. They become part of the entity itself, their consciousness absorbed into its collective appetite. The representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some had witnessed devastating wars and natural catastrophes, but nothing in their experience compared to what the human captain described. This wasn't destruction. It was complete conversion of everything familiar into something utterly foreign and hostile. Minho went on to explain Earth's final desperate hours. Our scientists worked around the clock, trying everything they could think of. Nuclear weapons, antimatter bombs, even attempts to collapse our sun into a black hole. Nothing slowed it down. The entity just absorbed the energy and grew stronger. The breakthrough came when Earth's top physicists proposed something that violated every safety protocol ever written. They would tear holes in the fabric of space-time itself, creating unstable portals to other dimensions. It was incredibly dangerous, with a high probability of destroying what remained of humanity in the process. We had less than 6 hours before the entity reached our last population centers, Minho recalled. Millions of people were already gone, absorbed into its expanding mass. We could see it moving across the continents like a living ocean, consuming everything in its path. Cities, forests, mountains, all becoming part of this cosmic nightmare. The evacuation ships launched through these dangerous dimensional tiers, not knowing if they would survive the journey or simply be torn apart by the violent forces involved. Many vessels were lost in the chaotic escape, their crews sacrificing themselves, so others might have a chance to warn the rest of the universe. But then Minho delivered the words that struck fear into every heart in that chamber. We didn't choose this galaxy randomly. We came here because our calculations showed it was the safest option, but safe doesn't mean permanent. The entity doesn't stop hunting just because its prey escapes to another dimension. He explained how this cosmic predator had developed the ability to track its targets across the barriers between realities. It could follow the dimensional signatures left by fleeing civilizations, pursuing them through tiers in space-time like some unstoppable cosmic bloodhound. Our arrival here has created a trail, Minho warned. The entity will follow that trail directly to your populated sectors. Your worlds, your people, your entire civilization, all of it is now at risk because we sought refuge among you. The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. By helping the human survivors, They had unknowingly painted a target on their own backs. The entity that had consumed Earth would soon come hunting in their galaxy, drawn by the dimensional wake of the refugee ships. Council member G1 was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. Are we looking at a choice between abandoning these survivors or risking the destruction of our entire civilization? The debate that followed would rage for hours, growing more heated as the full scope of the threat became clear. Some representatives argued for immediately helping the humans, seeing it as a moral imperative. Others demanded the survivors be eliminated before they could draw the entity to their worlds. While the politicians argued, deep space monitoring stations began reporting troubling data. Strange energy fluctuations were appearing along the galaxy's outer rim, the same type of signatures that had preceded the entity's arrival at Earth. Navigation Officer Sumin stepped forward with star charts that made the situation even more dire. The maps showed the entity's path of destruction stretching back through millennia, 17 entire galaxies consumed over thousands of years. Each galaxy had been discovered through survivors who thought they had successfully escaped to safety. The pattern was always the same. Refugees fleeing to a new galaxy, followed eventually by the arrival of their cosmic pursuer. No matter how far they ran or how well they hid, the entity always found them. And when it did, it consumed not just the original survivors, but every living thing in their new home. As the council members studied these horrifying charts, one terrible truth became unavoidable. There might be no escape from what was coming. When death came calling. The endless debates in the Galactic Council chambers came to an abrupt halt when the emergency alarms began screaming throughout the station. Representatives who had been arguing for hours about whether to help the human survivors suddenly found themselves facing a crisis that made their political discussions seem utterly meaningless. The first reports came from the outer colonies, distant settlements on the galaxy's edge that served as early warning systems for any external threats. But these weren't typical distress calls about pirate raids or natural disasters. These were messages of pure terror, transmitted by people watching their entire reality dissolve around them. Colony 7 Alpha reporting massive spatial distortions, came one frantic transmission. The stars they're changing color. Something's wrong with space itself. The fabric of reality is bending and twisting like it's being digested by something enormous. Then the transmission cut to static, and Colony 7 Alpha simply ceased to exist. Within hours, the pattern became horrifyingly clear. The entity wasn't randomly destroying settlements as it moved through the galaxy. It was conducting a systematic harvest, consuming star systems in carefully planned waves that maximized its efficiency. Each conquered system seemed to provide it with more knowledge about the galaxy's layout, allowing it to target the most populated areas next. The speed of destruction defied all understanding of physics. Entire solar systems that should have taken years to evacuate were vanishing in a matter of hours. The entity didn't just destroy planets, it consumed them so completely that space-time itself seemed to forget they had ever existed. Dr. Chen, the Council's chief astrophysicist, struggled to explain what their deep space sensors were detecting. The entity's presence is warping the fundamental structure of reality around it, she reported to the emergency session. It's not just eating matter and energy, it's consuming the quantum foundations that hold space-time together. But the most terrifying aspect of the entity's advance wasn't its speed or its power, it was its intelligence. As it consumed each world, it seemed to be learning from the inhabitants it absorbed. The tactical patterns it used became more sophisticated with each system it conquered, as if it was integrating the knowledge and memories of its victims into its own cosmic consciousness. The human survivors watched these developments with grim recognition. Captain Minho stood before the council once again, but this time his warnings carried the weight of immediate reality rather than distant possibility. This is exactly how it began on Earth, he told the assembled representatives. First the outer colonies, then the industrial worlds, then the core systems. It learns from everything it consumes, becoming smarter and more dangerous with each victory. It was then that the UES Resilient revealed its true nature. The massive human vessel had been floating quietly near the council station, appearing to be just another refugee ship. But when the entity's threat became undeniable, the Resilient began powering up weapons systems that dwarfed anything in the Council's combined arsenal. Energy readings spiked off the scale as weapons platforms emerged from hidden compartments throughout the ship's hull. These weren't conventional energy cannons or missile systems. They were devices that seemed to bend the laws of physics, drawing power from sources that the Council's scientists couldn't even identify. Chief Engineer Dane stepped forward to explain the impossible technology. Humanity's final years weren't spent just running from the entity, she revealed. Every moment we could spare was dedicated to developing weapons specifically designed to wound our pursuer. We studied its behavior, analyzed its structure, and created tools that function on principles your science hasn't discovered yet. The weapons included quantum disruptors that could tear holes in the entity's composite structure, reality anchors that prevented it from warping space-time to its advantage, and energy projectors that operated on dimensional frequencies the entity couldn't easily absorb. But perhaps most importantly, the human ship carried knowledge, tactical information, gained through humanity's desperate final battles against the cosmic predator. They knew its attack patterns, its vulnerabilities, and the specific frequencies that could disrupt its control over absorbed matter. Captain Minho made an offer that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. "We propose an alliance," he announced to the stunned council. "Humanity's weapons and tactical knowledge, combined with your fleets and resources. Separately, we'll all be consumed, just like the 17 galaxies that came before us. Together, we might have a chance." The response was immediate and unprecedented. Species that had maintained Cold Wars for centuries suddenly found themselves sharing battle plans and coordinating strategies. Ancient enemies put aside territorial disputes to focus on the threat that would make all their conflicts meaningless if left unchecked. The crystalline hegemony offered their phase-shift technology. The Metal Brotherhood contributed their self-repairing, battle platforms. The Psionic Collective provided their mind-linked coordination systems. For the first time in galactic history, dozens of different species were working toward a single goal. But as the combined fleets prepared for battle, Lieutenant Yuna, the Resilience Tactical Officer, revealed humanity's most closely guarded secret. The human ship carried something called a cascade weapon, a device that theoretical models suggested could actually destroy the entity completely. "There's a catch," Yuna explained, her voice heavy with the weight of what she was about to reveal. "The cascade weapon works by creating a chain reaction that propagates through the entity's dimensional matrix. But to initiate that reaction, someone has to get close enough to plant the device directly into the entity's core structure." The silence that followed was deafening as the implications became clear. "The weapon requires a sacrifice," she continued. "Whoever deploys it won't survive the cascade reaction, and the energy release will be so massive that it could destabilize space-time across multiple sectors. We're talking about an explosion that will echo across the galaxy for millennia." The assembled fleet commanders understood what this meant. Victory against the entity was possible, but it would come at a cost that would reshape their entire galaxy. The question now wasn't whether they could defeat their cosmic enemy, but whether they were prepared to pay the price that victory would demand. As the entity's advanced scouts probed deeper into populated space, the greatest alliance in galactic history prepared for a battle that would determine the fate of all life in their corner of the universe. The battle that changed everything. The Kepler Nexus had always been the beating heart of galactic civilization. Massive space stations orbited ancient stars, connected by shipping lanes that carried goods and people between hundreds of different worlds. It was here that cultures met, traded, and built the foundations of interstellar society. Now it was about to become the site of the most important battle in galactic history. The entity had chosen its target with terrifying intelligence. By consuming the Nexus, it wouldn't just destroy a few star systems, it would cripple the entire galaxy's ability to coordinate, communicate, and resist. Trade routes that had operated for thousands of years were already beginning to twist and warp as the cosmic predator's influence spread through the region. Captain Minho stood on the bridge of the Resilient, watching as the largest fleet in Galactic History assembled around him. Ships from dozens of species filled the void, their different designs and technologies creating a tapestry of desperate hope. Crystalline vessels that looked like living jewels floated alongside metallic warships, shaped like geometric sculptures. Organic bioships pulsed with their own internal light next to sleek energy-based constructs that seemed to be made of pure plasma. All fleet commanders, this is Captain Minho, he broadcast across the massive armada. What we're about to face isn't like any enemy you've encountered before. It doesn't just destroy, it absorbs, learns, and adapts. Every ship we lose becomes part of its growing intelligence. The entity's arrival was preceded by reality itself beginning to break down. Space twisted into impossible shapes as the cosmic Predator's influence spread through the nexus. Stars flickered and changed color as their fundamental properties were altered. Planets that had existed for billions of years simply faded from existence, leaving behind empty orbital paths that space-time seemed to forget. When the entity finally materialized, it defied every attempt at description. It wasn't a ship or a creature. It was a living distortion of reality itself, stretching across multiple star systems like a cancerous growth in the fabric of space. Tendrils of transformed matter reached out from its core, each one capable of consuming entire worlds in minutes. The battle began with conventional tactics, but it quickly became clear that normal warfare was useless against such an opponent. Energy weapons that could vaporize asteroids simply fed the entity more power. Kinetic projectiles were absorbed and converted into more extensions of its growing mass. Nuclear explosions were consumed like tiny snacks that only made it hungrier. This was where humanity's desperate years of research proved invaluable. Lieutenant Chen, now commanding the tactical coordination between all fleet elements, began implementing strategies that had been developed specifically for fighting an enemy that couldn't be destroyed through normal means. All ships switch to quantum disruption frequencies, she ordered. Target the connection points between the entities, different segments. We can't destroy it directly, but we can interrupt its ability to coordinate its various parts. The human-designed weapons began to take effect. Quantum disruptors created holes in the entity's structure that took time to heal. Reality anchors prevented it from warping space-time to create tactical advantages. Most importantly, the coordinated attack patterns kept it from adapting to any single strategy long enough to develop effective countermeasures. But the entity was learning faster than anyone had anticipated. Within hours of the battle's start, it began demonstrating knowledge of the fleet's tactics and technologies. Worse, captured vessels weren't just being destroyed, they were being converted into extensions of the entity itself, turning the galaxy's own ships against their former allies. Commander Torres watched in horror as a crystalline heavy cruiser that had been consumed just minutes earlier emerged from the entity's mass, its beautiful geometric hull now twisted into something alien. And wrong. The ship still retained its original weapons and defensive systems, but now they served the cosmic predator's hunger. It's using our own technology against us, Torres reported to the fleet command. Every ship we lose makes it stronger and more dangerous. The battle raged across multiple star systems as the entity's influence continued to spread. Entire sections of the combined fleet found themselves cut off from communications as space itself became unreliable. Ships that tried to retreat discovered that the normal routes through hyperspace had been blocked or altered, trapping them in an ever-shrinking combat zone. It was during the battle's darkest hour that Chen made the decision that would be remembered for millennia. The experimental quantum cascade weapon aboard the Defiance represented humanity's last desperate gambit, a device that could theoretically destroy the entity completely, but only at an unthinkable cost. The cascade weapon needs to be deployed from inside the entity's core structure, Chen explained to the fleet commanders. Someone has to manually pilot the ship through its defenses and detonate the device at the exact center of its mass. The pilot won't survive, and the explosion will be so massive that it could destabilize this entire region of space. The silence that followed was broken by voices from across the fleet, volunteering for the suicide mission. Representatives from dozens of different species offered to sacrifice their lives for the galaxy's survival. It was a moment that crystallized everything humanity had hoped to achieve, not dominance or gratitude, but genuine unity in the face of extinction. But Chen had already made her choice. "The Defiance is humanity's ship," she said quietly. "This is our responsibility." As the Defiance began its final approach toward the entity's core, something remarkable happened. The diverse species of the galaxy worked together with a coordination that surpassed anything they had achieved in centuries of civilization. Crystalline ships provided cover with their advanced shielding. Metal Brotherhood vessels cleared defensive obstacles with their heavy weapons. Psionic collective ships linked their minds to guide the Defiance through the entity's chaotic interior structure. The final moments of the battle were both terrifying and beautiful. As the Cascade weapon detonated, reality itself seemed to hold its breath. The entity's death scream echoed across dimensions as its cosmic appetite was finally satisfied by its own destruction. The explosion created a new nebula where the Predator had once fed, its brilliant colors serving as a memorial to both the civilizations it had consumed and the heroes who had stopped it. Humanity paid the ultimate price for the galaxy's salvation, but their legacy transformed everything they left behind. The Galactic Council evolved from a collection of competing civilizations into a true interstellar community dedicated to protecting all sentient life. The bonds forged in that desperate battle became the foundation for a golden age of cooperation and exploration that would last for thousands of years. In the end, humanity achieved something far greater than survival. They gave the galaxy hope.